All right. Welcome, Dr. Porter, to the Biohacker Babes podcast. We're thrilled to have you today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. It's not often I get to talk to two beautiful women, so let's go for it.
Oh, thank you.
No, I heard you had a fabulous weekend in Austin. I was really jealous to not be there at Modern Nirvana. So I'm sure that's not entirely true, but we're so happy to be here with you.
I was telling my wife that I was born in the wrong century because there were a lot of beautiful women here. I couldn't believe, but yeah, it's a great group, and I was so impressed that so many young people were here. I told her, I said, I think that at least 90% of the audience was under 30. Which
Wow.
when I was growing up, my dad being a Silva instructor, we were always doing seminars for meditation, and usually it was the 55 to 70-year-old women that were showing up, and because they were the ones that had the crisis that really realized it. It's so great to see young people getting involved and actually learning about transforming their lives.
That's amazing.
Incredible.
So this idea of prevention medicine is maybe catching on.
Yes.
That's really good news.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The new generation is changing things. So
Yes,
that's so great to
exactly.
hear. Yeah. Well, I obviously want to talk a lot about brain health today. We love talking about that. And I think today, more than ever, with the stress people are under, we're seeing a big impact on brain function and overall health. And we definitely want to talk about our favorite technology, the BrainTap, which you created. We'll get into some of the technology later in the episode. But before we get into that, can you just talk to us about why we should be focusing on brain health? Like, why is this so important?
Well, the main controller, the master controller of the whole system is the brain. If the brain, which is 70% of the nervous system, isn't regulating correctly, you could be taking the world's greatest supplements, but you're going to just pee them out, like the doctors would say, because if you're under stress, there's no blood flow in the gut. And so what happens is all that good nutrient just gets flushed out. That's why you got to take so much. So, I mean, we did one study, just to give an example, with a group in Provo, Utah, where they were doing amino acids for the brain. And while they were doing it with BrainTap, they actually could absorb 30% more of the nutrient than they would if they were just doing it on their own, or looking at their phone was even worse. When they were looking at their phone, they very rarely got it was like they were stressed out because they were looking at their phone doing the treatment. So they started eliminating the phone use and then started having them use BrainTap so they could down-regulate that sympathetic system and upregulate parasympathetics for healing.
Wow. So just being on the phone alone, regardless of activity, it was regulating sympathetic.
Oh yeah. I mean, our brain isn't just looking at a screen. It's actually looking at every pixel. We have the world's greatest biocomputer, right? The universe's maybe greatest computer. So it can do a lot more than we think it's doing. You know, our eyes are taking in thousands of pieces of information. They say over 2,000, but we only act on 40 of them. So that's why we can walk into the kitchen when we're with somebody and they say, get me the salt shaker, and we think it and we can't see it. And then they finally walk in and they say, it's right here. And you go, well, it wasn't there a second ago. It's because we didn't render it.
Right.
You know, so,
Yep.
so
You must have moved that. Yeah, I've been there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Really
Wow.
wild.
Yep.
So we know fear is a big part of what's happening to our overall health and chronic stress state. How do we begin to break this down and get back to our baseline? How do we get out of default mode network? What are some basic things we can do to reset our nervous system?
Yeah, great question. In science, we call this psychoimmunology because our psychology actually affects our immunity. So we know that when you downregulate parasympathetic function, and you upregulate cortisol and these things, these block the healing receptors of the brain. They actually make us more susceptible. That's why when some people, when they go on vacation, they actually start getting headaches in their body because they're so used to operating at such a high level of stress. When they release it, the body finally gets to detox and do all these things. So they get the summer colds and things like that when they go on vacation. So what we can start to do, the simplest thing to do is learn a breathing technique, because breathing, we just had I had 2 papers this spring actually that were published in PubMed with Bhopal, India, where we did Kriya breathing. And we showed that by doing Kriya breathing, you can balance the hemispheres of the brain and get you into this parasympathetic state. So, I mean, that's an ancient technology, right? I mean, people don't think about it that way, but that gets the body ready for what's happening and oxygenates the cells, but it also activates a lot of other systems because there's more in the air than just oxygen, right? There's something called pranic energy. the rishis would say your next piece of information, the next knowledge that you need is in the breath. So if you don't breathe, you don't know. All negative emotional states, fear, frustration, anxiety, depression, you name the negative state, they all have one big thing in common: breathing. Right? If you're, I have grandkids now, but when my children were young and my grandkids, when they get angry, if you tell them just breathe, right? They get more upset, right?
Oh yeah.
Because
yeah.
but
Don't tell me what to do.
Right. But what I did with my kids is I said, we're gonna practice something here. And I got them practicing breathing. When they got upset, all I'd have to say is, remember the most powerful force in the universe. And they'd immediately answer, because I conditioned them to do it. They'd say, harmony, Dad, harmony. And it would break the state, because harmonics and coherence is what we want. And most people don't have that. Of course, if you're getting all of your information from broadcast news, that's what they're doing. They're for whatever reason, they've mechanized our news, and they don't give you a solution. The worst thing you can do to somebody is say you have a problem, but there's no solution. That's why, the medical model for what's happened in 2020, oh, you've got this problem, go home. 2 weeks, we'll see how you do. It's the first time in history they tell you you've got a problem, but they don't have a solution. It's terrible. Our brain craves a solution to a problem. But if you don't give it to them, there's the hope factor. Our brain actually lives in the field, in an infinite field of possibility. So if you take away all those possibilities and collapse the field to one choice, the one choice is whatever, you get a jab or you take this thing or that thing, that's fearful for the body, because we're infinite beings. These are temporary. This is
Vessels.
temporary. Yeah. So, we're here exploring this reality right now and doing our thing. And, they're telling us we can't fix our car, but we just need to find the right mechanic or has the right gasoline to run through it, or has the right technology to get it moving to the right direction. But that's the main thing. And I think fear, I actually wrote about it in my first book. I talk about it in all my books, but the fear is the biggest detractor for enlightenment, or for educating the brain. Even if a student goes into a social situation thinking that they're less than, or that they can't learn, or they're not good enough, they've already lost, because so we have to reframe that. We have challenges, we can overcome those challenges, we can learn, develop, and grow in different ways. But if you tell somebody, no, you're stupid, you can't do this, or your body's not able to do it without this or that, these bodies can do incredible things. Look at Wim Hof. They can inject poison into a system. He can do breathing and jump into an ice bath, like you're talking earlier. Could jump into the ice bath and it doesn't affect him. When I was growing up, they used to do what they called the polar plunge in Michigan. We thought those people were crazy. Now people are paying to do it. So it's, that's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. The biology of belief is so powerful. And what you just said about testing, it makes me think of a friend of mine. I think she's very smart, but she tells herself that she's stupid. And she says, I can't take tests. Every time I take a test, I fail. And so what happens when she takes the test? Right. She always fails. But I think she's really smart. It's just overcoming that. So speaking of fear and, what's going on in the world, what can we be doing as far as like getting into nature, like something that's totally free that can maybe help us overcome some of this?
Well, in China and Japan, they have something called forest bathing, right? So you get outside. We actually know in neuroscience that if we get around trees and things, we actually interact with them. There used to be they used to think, oh, tree hugging hippies, blah, blah, blah. Now they know that's healthy. It's not.
I love hugging trees.
Yeah. So one of my favorite pictures of my wife is we were up in the redwoods and she's hugging this big redwood tree. And we have that sitting there because my dad would always call her a tree hugging hippie.
That's a compliment.
So she went to Berkeley for school. So he was always afraid that she was going to be with one of those sticks, with one of the protesters, that are out there.
Yeah.
Because that's what was going on there. But I think getting out there, taking off your shoes. They get in touch with Earth. Clint Oprah, which I'm sure you both know, he's a good friend of mine. And we always knew there was something good. If you can't get outside to do it, then you've got to find a way to do it. There's just no reason for it. A good example, I had a guy I was helping in Phoenix, this was years ago, and helping him stop smoking. He was a DJ at one of the radio stations. And when he stopped smoking, he couldn't do his radio show. He says, I got to go back to smoking. I can't do my radio show. And I said, well, what are you doing differently? He said, well, I used to go out on my go outside, walk around my backyard, have a cigarette, and just think about my show. And he said, since I stopped smoking, I don't go out anymore. I said, well, what stops you from just going out and daydreaming? What happened to, I love that. I saw a t-shirt the other day, and I don't know if it was at Modern Nirvana or we've done 3 days worth of things here, but it's kind of blurred now. Somebody had a shirt on that says, don't give up your daydream. That's the reality. Get outside, let your mind expand. Don't get locked into the belief systems of other people. Start thinking outside the box. You're only 6 inches away from a change. So you go ahead and do that, and you change your perception. Why do people travel the earth? Because they want a new environment. They want a new experience. And really it's our body craves those because we actually match the environment we're in. When we're out in nature, we know it's somewhere between 12 hertz and 7 hertz frequency, depending upon where we're at. And our body loves that. It starts to create those wonderful neurotransmitters like GABA, acetylcholine, and all these things. Our body actually responds. We're supposed to be out there. In fact, these bodies were designed to be outside while the sun is shining, right? We didn't want to go into the cave. We were forced to go in there. We didn't even build a fire so that we could stay out longer because we knew it. Now we have televisions and internet and games, and people get locked into inside thinking that that's the safety. The worst thing that could happen to people is to be isolated. In fact, they've actually eliminated most isolation in prisons because they know it's so unhealthy. So why would they make the public do it? It seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah. And how does nature impact the brain waves? Do you see a difference in beta, theta?
Okay. Yeah. If you were on a spaceship with me and we were heading toward Earth, we could measure the frequency of the planet. It would go from 0.01 to 100. And our brain actually communicates. It's always measuring the environment's frequency and matches it. And it does this almost like a homing pigeon. And the reason it does that is if you look at a map, almost 90% or more of the people in the world live close to a body of water because water resonates at 10 hertz frequency. So that's why when we go to the ocean or we go to the lake, we start feeling relaxed. Our body starts creating those wonderful neurotransmitters and endorphins, and we start feeling good. And the farther we get away from them, really the sicker our body becomes. So it keeps us near the water because it knows we need it. We're 70% water or 80% water. So we know we need to match that environment. And now if we go into the city, I had a friend of mine that when I lived in San Francisco, we were going to a show in New York, and she had a horse farm. It was out in Livermore, California, and it was beautiful. She was always out with her horses and playing in nature, but she wanted to go to a trade show that's in New York because it's glamorous. She wanted to go there and see everything and be a part of it. She only made it one day in New York. She actually had what I call digital poisoning, because when you get to the cities, those cities resonate. In LA, it's the same thing. When you get into the cities, they resonate at about 18 to 24 hertz frequency. That's high stress, cortisol producing. Basically, your body's always on ready alert. It's going, what the hell's going on here? I need to figure this out. And that's why people downregulate with pills. And we have the world's greatest pharmacy, right in our heads. We can dispense 25,000 neurochemicals at any moment in time with a thought. But if we're in the environment, we don't have to think about it. We can just be in that environment. And the environment creates that for us. Or with us, maybe is a better way to say it, because we interact with it. It's called frequency following response. That's the science. So think of the shamans or anyone else in ancient traditions. They would do these things, like you go on a walkabout. They want to, all these things, they're all designed to get you outside yourself so you can forget who you thought you were and you can become who you're supposed to be. Our whole life, people are telling us what to think. And, the world is craving people that know how to think. But everybody just wants to be told what to think.
Yeah. Renee, I think we were just talking about this yesterday. Was it a Harvard professor that was fired because he was teaching people how to think?
Yeah, he's been teaching this critical thinking course at Harvard for, I think, 30 years. And this past semester, he was having his students apply critical thinking to what is happening during the pandemic. And he got fired.
Yeah, they don't want anybody thinking.
No. Our education system is built on what to think.
Right. Yeah. This is what you're supposed to think. What they do actually in most cases is they just teach you to become a test taker. This is the information you want to know. Do you know it? And the stress is so high that if you don't know it, we're going to hold you back, or we're going to penalize you. We're going to call you stupid. You're not smart enough. The school systems, there's a school that I support in India. It's called the Creative School. And I go over there anytime I can when I go to India. And their school is actually built, you two would love it. It's all open air. It's all grounded.
Oh,
Kids don't wear shoes at school. The
Ah,
first thing they do when they get in there in the morning is they they all have BrainTap in every room. They have a 12-station brain tapping station because we outfitted them so they could do it as part of the experiment. They do martial arts, they do Tai Chi, they do meditation besides BrainTap. They're doing the other things. That's all part of their daily curriculum. And
amazing.
they spend time doing creative things. And then when they get into the high school levels, they're still doing those things, but then they get into the critical thinking. They don't even learn all those other, like math and English and all that. The brain shouldn't even be learning that. In fact, there's science now shows that the reason that we don't have didactic and photographic memories, because we do, but we don't have the recall networks anymore, is because of reading too early.
oh,
A
wow.
lot of people think, oh, my son or daughter can read at 3. Well, congratulations, you just limited their belief to be creative, unless you did that at the same time. So what they're showing is you got to do both. Like when I was growing up, it was like, don't daydream, I was an artist, so I got a scholarship for art first before I got into all this. And I could care less about the rest of the school. That's why I was held back in 2nd grade. And then finally, when my dad started teaching us meditation when I was 12, I realized I could do both. I could be creative and and then I became an honor roll student, because school's easy once you realize the game, and it is just a game, but if you let the stress get to you, you can't play the game anymore. You've let them control the rules. You want to play within the game, but set your own rules.
Yeah. I was watching CBS Sunday Morning yesterday because I'm hanging out with my parents this weekend, and that's like Sunday ritual. And they were doing this spot on children in schools that are going to these academic institutions that are just really, really pushing for like the highest GPA possible. And there's so much stress. They're all just under chronic stress. They all feel like failures, even though they're incredibly brilliant. It's just so sad to watch the pressure that's being put on high school kids. And I think like, oh, you think that's stressful? Like, wait for the rest of your life. And
Right.
like, what are we doing to
Yeah.
these brains that are still developing? And that's really sort of like the precedent that's being set for young kids these days, is that stress is totally normal. What the
Yeah.
heck do we do? I know you talk a lot about meditation. A lot of people have an aversion to meditation because they think they can't do it. I love what you say about it. We're like training the brain to be active, not necessarily shutting off. Is that something that we can teach kids younger and younger? I think that's really cool that
Right.
you learned at such a young age.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Most people don't know that yoga was actually designed to prepare the brain for meditation. Some people confuse it now because there's yoga studios all over the world. They think it's an exercise. It was an
Mhm.
exercise just to get the nervous system ready for the yogis to meditate, and then they figured out it would help the king and queen have sex longer. So there's
Ah,
different things.
cool.
So
Wow.
we all have that primitive that nature of we want to be fed, we want to be protected, and we want to have sex. That's so they all these things that are happening in the brain, the primitive brain I'm talking about, that drives and motivates us when we go to the default mode network you were talking about. And I think that we have to interrupt it. So with children, I recommend that they start doing yoga or Tai Chi, because that's an activity. We have to get the kids off the couch, off the computer games. When we measure people's HRVs or we do their brain scans, we find the people that have the best functioning nervous system are those that dance is one. We're actually putting a dance program together on BrainTap to help people to stop, basically stop shitting all over themselves about dance. Because when you can move your nervous system, we're designed to move, breathe, and discover. That's what we're built for. But so many people, oh, I don't want to dance, I look ridiculous, or I don't want to learn Tai Chi. That's like some cult, or something. They don't understand that these things were designed to get us to become more intelligent.
Yeah.
So and an intelligent person, of course, doesn't fall for what's going on right now. A thinking person doesn't fall for what's going on right now. It doesn't make sense. We talk about that critical thinking. So with the kids, when you get them moving and breathing, they'll get in touch with themselves, but then they'll start to realize there's no separation of things. They'll feel the flow and energy of the world. We're energy beings. In fact, science now shows you probably have done this. I used to have on a bumper sticker this was when I was 24. I used to have a bumper sticker that said, I am light. And a lot of people used to give me a lot of shit about that. Like, eat your granola, whatever,
Yeah.
things like that.
Go hug a
And,
tree.
yeah, go hug a tree. But the reality is now science shows that we are light beings. We share
Yeah.
information with each other through biophotons. So, but if they can shut us down, let's say, or keep us away from each other, because when we're together in a room, I mean, this is great having you here on Zoom and sharing, because that's what we have to do here. But if we were in the same room, we'd be sharing energy. We'd be sharing light.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important. Who do you hang out with? Because you're actually getting their information. Their information is commingling with yours. And because our mind is non-locale, I mean, you aren't your mind and you're not your body. You're the thing that animates all of those things. And so, I like the Sufi message. It says the seer is never the seen. So as you think about who we are, what we can teach the children most, when they get up and move and breathe or dance or do something, they'll start to make the connections themselves, because it's innate. It's not, they don't have to learn this. This is part of our nature. But what they do is they denature us, just like GMO foods. we're being manipulated and changed. So I think the biggest thing is to get them back to doing things that are natural. Get them doing creative things, because a creative mind also, if there's a problem, they'll learn to solve it. But if they don't have creativity, if there's a problem, they'll look outside themselves for the solution. The more we look outside ourselves, the less likely we are to have a permanent solution. We have a solution where we have to pay for it, or we have to do this or that for it. We don't own it. If we can own that solution, like the people that get paid the most in the world are those problem solvers, right? If somebody has a problem, you solve it, you got a lot of friends, because they're going to come to you and do it. But there's not many of them right now. We need more of those problem solvers, and that look at the whole planet, not just one little part of it. We can't be and we can't all fly into space and thank our staff for putting us out to outer space and think that's a good thing. I mean, how terrible is that? Like, I'm really glad that I bought my Amazon Prime account so he could fly into space.
Right.
That's not what I mean. I would rather he took that money and helped some people get educated. I think we should be donating our money to educational funds that teach that critical thinking. We should all hire that guy to put together a children's program that teaches critical thinking for first graders, and then the more advanced class that we go, because that's the one thing we're missing in this world is thinkers.
Yeah, but sadly, those thinkers and those problem solvers are all being shoved into a closet right now. So we need to, we need to shine the light on them. But
that's right.
That aspect about creativity really resonates with me. Renee and I grew up as dancers. I'm still a dancer. I'm a performer, and like everything just feels better when I'm allowed to move and express myself physically in a free space. And you just feel like the light turns on, the brain works, emotions flow more freely. It's like there's so much clarity. And I think that would be really, really awesome to bring that to children.
Yeah. I mean, the more, that's why I always tell people after they get done, like our clinics, because we have 3,000, roughly close to 3,000 clinics that use BrainTap. And they say, what do they do after BrainTap? I said, well, they need to learn either Tai Chi, yoga, or dance. Because if you don't get the nervous system moving, it's like, why do it? It's just going to revert back to what it is. That's why they say sitting is the new smoking, so we have to get people moving again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the BrainTap, so you said we are light. Can you maybe talk about why light and sound are so impactful for us?
Sure. One more research I want to bring up so they understand light. They just have, and I'm looking for this research because somebody talked about it, but I know it's true because he referenced it. They can now measure the light photon release from our heart. We have 44,000 neutrino cells in our heart, and we give light to each other. So when you said how many does it take, we know that if this room was dark, how many light bulbs would it take to light this room? Well, we need one light person for every 5,000 dark people. All these followers, we could change the world with very few people if they would just shed the light. And what they said is that somebody who is negative, that basically doesn't have the energy, they only put out about 5% of their heart's potential. But somebody who has that nervous system we're talking about, that moves, breathes, it's energetic, and has gratitude and love, they actually put out 200%. They actually put out more than they have. So we have the potential. So, we are the light that's going to change this world, and we can change them by being that person. So the reason that light is so important, when we think about meditation. Meditation, and when I first started, my dad was a Silva instructor. So we learned something called the Silva sound. And it was this weird sound that would go in the room. And I now know it as isochronic tones, but I didn't know that at the time. But everybody in the room would just fall in sync. Everybody's brain would be at 10 hertz frequency. And so that sound does it. But what we now know with neuroscience is that only engages about 70% of the brain. So if we can use retinal flashing with your eyes closed, but what happens is the light comes in through the eyes. So when somebody has, over the years, has told you, wow, you've got beautiful eyes, what they're really saying is you have a beautiful brain, because your eyes are your brain. They're not just brain matter, they are your brain. So basically you're getting light into the brain. We need to get light in there, because most people, when they meditate or they try to get what we call now brain fitness, they try to train their brain, they fall asleep. Sleeping is not meditating, or it's not activating those networks. And what we want to do is take the default mode network offline long enough to get the brain to work. Because if we just use that default mode network, we're going to run around scared and afraid, because we're just looking for safety all the time. And that uncertainty, that happens. So what light does is we can bring light in through the eyes, with your eyes closed. It's going to be attracted by the cranial nerve 2, which basically activates regions of the brain. We now know when you introduce light, and this was years ago when I started working with Neuro-Ophthalmology Research Association, we showed that the 70% that's activated by sound, right now as you're listening to me, you're also processing over 25,000 pieces of information through sound, but you're only acting on less than 40 of them. So our brain is a really good filtering system. So we need to add, when somebody goes, I want to learn and grow, but they don't want to change. They don't want it to be stressful. Well, that's not going to happen. You're going to atrophy if you don't stress out the body. So we need to get outside of our comfort zone. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be stressful, but it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be fun, right? We've all, like when you're dancing, I'm sure that when you first started dancing and they teach you a new dance move, at first it's hard, but then once you practice it and do it, and then you're doing it in your sleep, you don't even worry about it. Most people, and I always told the people that I work with that are clients, I say, anything worth doing well is worth doing terribly at first. So you've got to be, I mean, that's how we learned to walk, right? We didn't just jump up on our feet. And if you have children, and you're watching them, they didn't just jump up and walk across the room. They quickly fell down, got back up, fell down, got back up. And then, but what children do that adults don't is, once they do it right, they don't keep falling down. They don't start falling down again until they start running. So they get rid of all those negatives. They get rid of all the times they fell. Now the subconscious remembers them, but it knows that's not the right balance. That's not the right way to do it. And now it knows how to do it. But as adults, we start to own our failures and say, "Oh, that's me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough." Like Smalley on Saturday Night Live. The opposite, I should say, where we'd say, "I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Gosh darn it, people just like me." But people use that in the negative, right? So
yeah.
And this words change. So what the light does, because people usually they don't have enough energy. Today, it's all about energy. If you can increase your energy, you can have more joy, you can have more passion, you can have more love, more acceptance, you can be more tolerant. But if you don't, you start to go into those default modes because you're lacking energy. You can't make those decisions. You can't change. You're fearful. You're locked up, in other words. So the light, what we showed is that in order to keep this frontal lobe, which is what we need to keep active during brain training, we need to give it energy. So our body is designed to accept and exploit light. But remember, we're supposed to be outside for 18 hours a day, but we're not. So we need to expose it to light that's between 470 nanometer and usually about 860 nanometer light. Those are the good frequencies, and depends upon what's going on. Now, the ancient technologies, when I go to India, they talk about chromotherapy, which is light therapy. They knew about this 10,000 years ago. And so it's not like something that we have all these great light technologies out there, but what they would do is they would get up and do yoga at 3:30 in the morning. Everybody thinks that's because it's just early and nothing's around. No, what the ancient text says, that's when the most infrared light is hitting the planet. If you want to treat your brain, you need to use infrared light. So the yogis knew this. They would practice yoga outside with 8-10 minutes. Now, when do they practice Tai Chi? The same time. They're in a whole different country. So this is something that's been known since ancient times. We needed this light. So for about 3 hours in the morning, our planet is bathed with more infrared light than it is during the rest of the day. So if you want to treat your brain, now we can do it now through biohacking, but if you want to go outside and do that, you can do that. Now, it also goes through your house, so you don't have to be outside. We know infrared can go right through walls and things of that nature. But if you want to, it's going to be slowed down. But if you want to be outside, that's where you're going to get the most of it. So that's why I love doing yoga. When I was in Arizona, I used to go at 3:30 in the morning to do with the at 7th Street in Phoenix. That's where the Sikhs had their ashram, and there was a temple there, and you could go for free to do Kundalini yoga. So, you know, I would go there every morning and do yoga, and then you wake up, the temple doors would open, you'd see the sunlight, and just have these great experiences in the morning.
Awesome.
Very cool. Okay, 3:30 in the morning. I did not know that. Is that different in the summer or winter? Is it based off of the sun?
Yeah, it's based on when they just do it at 3:30, but it's based on three hours prior to what they would call sunrise, because we still have light. We still have light hitting the planet, but it's just not as much light.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So how are you capturing this in the BrainTap? And then can you go into how that's paired with like the holographic music, binaural beats?
Sure. So what we're doing is we have what's happening in your right ear with us. We also have light in the ears, by the way, because the best way to get light into the brain is through the eyes and the ears, because the ears control the temperature of the brain. You know, if it's cold outside, if it's cold outside, then your ears will get cold because the blood flow stops, because they don't want to bring that cold into the brain. You know, so the brain has to stay at constant temperature. If it's warm, if you're cold, and then you might get in, but it's hot outside, your brain, you'll get more blood flow through it. So your ears, the blood flows to the brain. It takes about 3 to 4 minutes. Through the rest of your body, it's 45 seconds. So if you're going to blood dope with light, you need to do the ears. It's one of the best ways to move through that cartilage. So the hemoglobin absorbs the light, the photic energy, and it finds that cell that's about to die in apoptosis, and it says, hey, give me that energy. And then as soon as it accepts that energy, the Krebs cycle starts again, kick starts the cell, and it remembers who it was. And they actually, there's a research they talk about at Harvard where they kept a chicken heart alive for 35 years. Because and the only reason it didn't was a janitor forgot to feed it. Because as long as it got the right nutrients, got the right light, and got detoxed, that the cells would not die.
Wow.
So there's no reason that our bodies aren't the same way. The toxic load is what's causing us to age. You know, so if we can get rid of that toxic load and keep the energy flow, then we're energy beings. So as long as we have our energy, then we can do it. So
and this idea that food gives us energy, but really it's intensive.
Food is, what is food? Food is converted into energy in the body. And most people are given, so we get it, a lot of people do sugar, right? So they think our body needs sugar. The reality is that our body doesn't need sugar, our body produces sugar. If you have a stressful event, you produce more sugar than a candy bar. The liver produces
I saw that on my CGM yesterday.
Yeah. Right. So if you want to really reduce your sugar consumption, reduce your stress. That's going to do more to reduce your sugar consumption than anything you put in your grocery cart. And then reduce your grocery cart too, because most people are eating 100 pounds of sugar a year. So, so we want to get back to the turn of the century when only people ate about 5 pounds of sugar a year. Now they're doing over 100 pounds a year. You know, a good friend of mine, Daryl Joffrey, wrote the book, Get Off Your Sugar. So if somebody has a problem, they should go get that book. And it's a really good one. It has a lot of great options in there. But so what we did is we said, in the early days, it was only sound. There was no light as far as this therapy goes. In the 80s, when I found out about light therapy, there was nothing like what we have today. We invented the first light and sound technology that was portable. We had a clinical model that was called the SILS, but it was $10,000. So not too many people had that. So we have to, so in the process of converting it down and making it available to everyone, light made it so that everyone could go into alpha. But then we found out with light, we could take everybody, 100% of the people we tested, 1,000 people we tested first, they all went to theta. Now, you might not think that's a big deal because there's a lot of lip service out there with people saying they meditate and go to theta. We've only met one person in the history of time, and we've measured in the last 10 years anyway, 10,000 brains. People meditate, they go to alpha, they don't go to theta. That takes a guru, you know, and we've measured
monks
some
can do that then.
Yeah. So we've actually had a chance in India to measure gurus, and I would say 50% of them can't do it.
Wow.
Because they're not real gurus. You know, they wear the robes, but they don't wear the light.
They're working on it.
Yeah, they're working on it. So it's very hard to do it without light and sound. So what we did to add to that was we also used frequency. So we're using Noje frequencies and solfeggio frequencies. Those are in the background. We don't really talk a lot about them. Now we could, because people are aware of them. But when we first started, that's just another crazy thing that people would have said, what are you doing that for? But what that does is that creates space. Everything in our known universe is based on frequency, light, and sound. Even though it's not real, we perceive it as reality because it has those features. So when we produce that in the brain's sensory-based network that's taking in all that information is actually creating your own space. So you're creating a space in what I call the quantum gap. So everything we see in the world is particles. This is all real as a particle. But before it was a particle, it was a wave. That has no location. It has no time. It has no space. It's infinite. We are infinite. That's the thing people don't understand is the you that is here on the screen is particles. It's temporary. It's not going to last. But the you that's in the wave is immortal, infinite. That's why our brain lives in an infinite field of possibility, as long as we keep it open, because everything we perceive in the world that's been created by man was first in the mind of a man or a woman. You know, it's not like, you know, that's why it's an evolutionary thing. We have this, and then we have that, and then we have that, but it's all still made up. It's all, you know, we're pretending this is all happening, and we all jointly believe it. So we live it and we experience it. So in some regards, what happened in 2020 is our responsibility, you know, so we have to, because we created it, we can dismantle it and create something better.
Yeah. Our good friend Freddie Kimmel, who I know you're familiar with too, was sharing with me Deepak's talk from the weekend and awesome. Comparing consciousness to matter. And he's like, matter doesn't exist. I think that's exactly what you're saying, which is kind of mind-blowing, but it does make sense. We create our reality.
Yeah, well, that's why, like, when I'm working with Quantum University and what we teach the new science of health, you have to have that component. It's not just about a physical thing. Because if you're just treating the physical thing, that would be like painting half your house. You know, you need to have the whole thing. You know, we need to have the mind-body connection and the spirit. You know, so many people say, I want to be more. I'm being more spiritual. I want to be more spiritual. I want to be enlightened. You can't be more than you are, but you can realize more than you are. You know, right now, what people are doing is they're hiding it from themselves. You know, it's like having a light under a bushel basket. You know, we need to take the bushel basket. That's the toxins and the stress and the anxiety and the fear. And we need to get rid of that so we can shine that light and be the light so that people understand it. And like what you're doing, sharing a message of hope, because the worst thing that can happen to a human is to give up hope, to tell them there's nothing you can do. Yeah. And you can tell, if you want to manipulate the masses, just give them a problem they can't solve. And then give them a temporary solution and keep changing the goalpost. You know, that's what's happening.
Exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. I wanted to say something similar. Before I discovered the BrainTap, I discovered this machine called the Light Portal. I don't know if you've come across it. Like 10 years ago, I found it, but it's using light, sound, crystals, vibration, all these things. But the machine is huge. I mean, it's the size of a bed and it's $120,000. So
bigger than a coffin. It's nuts.
It's a very large coffin. It'd be a very comfortable coffin.
Oh yeah.
But it's not practical to have in your house to travel with. But I always felt amazing after the session. But then when I discovered the BrainTap almost 3 years ago, I was like, this is like a portable version of that. And I love it because I can do it every day. I can take it on trips with me. I just think everyone should have it in their pocket.
Well, well, of course I do too, because I created it, but
Yeah.
and I do it, I do it every day. I've never missed a day since the 80s. But when we went
Wow.
to visit Lou Tai, who did the experiment with blue light therapy that shows at 40 hertz, it breaks down amyloid plaque. I don't know if you've seen that study.
No.
But there's a study out there that shows blue light will break down amyloid plaque. It's the best thing for fighting Alzheimer's. We've done some studies that blow away that. But our CEO, who knows the guy who runs the Brain Lab, set us up to go meet her. So we went to talk to her and we said, yeah, tell us what you're doing. I said, have you ever done any experiments with people? No, we're just building a $10 million room to do that. And I said, well, how much gamma are you creating? And they said 6%. I said, well, our headset, and I gave her one. I said, I want you to experiment with this because our average gamma increase is 21% with any session. You don't even have to do the gamma sessions, because the brain wants to evolve. So anytime you cross that 10 hertz frequency or 7.8 hertz frequency, you have a gamma burst and you have a delta burst. So it's like the whole system activates, and then it tries to go back to whatever was normal. But if you keep activating it, it keeps expanding it. And that's where consciousness comes in, the underlying reality of all things. So but we have to have the space for it. We have to have the capacity to handle it, or it'll burn out the system. It's like putting too much energy through a light bulb. We need to get the body ready. That's why it's important to be physically fit. That's why the gurus would do yoga, because the body couldn't handle the energy coming through the system. So if somebody's eating garbage or smoking cigarettes or destroying their body, drinking a lot of alcohol, I mean, a little bit of anything's okay, but a lot of anything is not, so we need to be very aware of that. But so as we do that's the key, is to find out what's going to work for you to raise your energy. If you can raise your energy and have that. So I still remember when we told that to Lou Tai, she didn't believe it, but then about 6 months later, one of our investors was visiting there because he also knew the same guy that Nicholas knew, our CEO, and he sent me a picture of her and him in her lab, because he asked her the question. He says, what's your competition? And she said, this little headset that only costs $600. She said, they're getting 21. She said, ours is a $10 million solution. Theirs is a $600 solution. So but when I was, this was back in the 80s as well, there used to be something called the Beitar bed. And it was a geodesic dome. And when you were on it, you felt like you were astral traveling. And we had a device then called the MC Square, which was the first light and sound machine. They would use it on it, but it cost $30,000 for this, and you needed a 2-story room to put it in, because it was a geodesic, Buckminster Fuller geodesic dome, but it actually, what we would call stabilize the environment, so that you had this structure, like you structure water. Because where I'm at right now, I'm swimming in water. We call it oxygen, but it's only 20 times less than the ocean. So we're actually swimming like fish, so we can structure this environment. So we do that with frequencies, right? Our government could be broadcasting 5G and no-J frequencies for health, cycling through them. Our cell phones could be beaming to us healthy energy every time we use them. But because there's somebody sick out there and doesn't want to look into it, or it might cost another penny, they're not doing it. But somebody will say enough's enough. They'll put up all these towers for us, so we could start broadcasting all these healing energies and use digital drugs instead of physical drugs. And we can start changing our mood and our environment by, just bathing the planet in love and acceptance and gratitude, which we could be broadcasting right now, because it's all just a frequency.
Right.
I love this idea of digital drugs, and that BrainTap is a digital drug. We're just tapping into our innate healing abilities. I know that you've likened something like the BrainTap to what we kind of get from plant medicine, like we can access our own DMT. I think that's really cool that we could do it without, but you have made this a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, we have a drug trial going right now with the BrainTap in Brazil. They're actually using their top pharmacologists, and they're doing it just like a drug study. They just did the blood draws. They just sent me the pictures on my phone, and they're getting phenomenal results, because the pilot study showed we upregulate 54 different neurotransmitters. So I always tell people that the world's greatest pharmacy isn't on the corner called Walgreens or whatever. It's your brain. Your brain can dispense 25,000 neurochemicals. So let's start producing the right ones at the right time, instead of, a lot of people just let life happen to them instead of letting life happen through them. There's a big difference, just go with the flow. That's the flow state, that everybody talks about. Just be there, but don't think it's about you. Just be in the experience.
Yeah. And to be in that flow state, what kind of brain waves are we seeing typically?
Well, it's not my research, but a woman that we hired to work with us back in the very beginning, she's no longer alive, but she wrote a book called The Master Brainwave. Her name is Ann Wise. She was from San Francisco. It was a great book. We used her a lot to consult with us. And she found out that the master brainwave is actually 45% beta, 30% alpha, and then the rest just kind of looks like a mountain, it just kind of goes down. But what we're seeing in today's environment, we had somebody at this event actually, and she had 51% gamma out of the box without doing anything. And I've never seen anybody but a guru in deep meditation have that much gamma, but she's walking around all day long like that. This is a person that's beaming energy and light out to the world. She's probably affecting so many people she doesn't even know about it. It's like, usually we see 5 to 6% gamma there, as an actual activity. They used to think gamma was high anxiety, but now we know it's high creativity and inventiveness. It's kind of like the theta brainwave on steroids. But we didn't know about when she did it. The reason I bring that up is when she did all her research, we couldn't measure gamma. 10 years ago, gamma wouldn't have been mentioned. But now, because we now know the brain waves go from 0.01 to 100, we used to think they ended at 18, because that's all we could measure. So if we in people like, and I love Muse, we use it all the time, but Muse took theta out of their equation. You have to get a third-party app just to measure theta on Muse, because you can't get theta with audio. So they didn't want that negative. So people weren't getting there, so they took it out. So they don't measure it.
Oh, interesting.
So and it's a really good tool, but you're only meditating to alpha. When you hear those birds, if you ever done, and we use it all the time.
Yeah.
We in fact, we just did one of our latest experiments. We used the Muse to track brain waves over time, because there's a third-party app that will do live readings, and we found that it's just as valuable as any other EEG machine. I mean, it's a pretty powerful little tool, but for some reason, because of marketing, probably they took theta off the menu. And because we wanted to use it, we had to find a different solution, because we wanted to show people in real time what the BrainTap's doing. So this third-party app allows us to use Muse as the collector of data, but we can get the data out of it. And so we showed that our algorithm actually does change the brain differently. So what we did was we took a 45-minute session, and we had 5 minutes of them just getting a baseline, what their brain's doing. We had them listen to music, and then we had a baseline of 5 minutes. Then we had that same music with our encoding, and then we had a baseline. And what we found was, after they listened to the music, of course, they relaxed. It had this significance. It took them to alpha. It was great. But right as soon as that music was over, almost instantaneously, it went right back to their stress state. The brain didn't change at all. But the one with the algorithm took them to theta, because it was an alpha training, took them to alpha. But then when it was over, it stayed. And we found out it stays for 72 hours. That's the halo effect of a BrainTap session. So that's why you have to do it at least every 72 hours to keep that change, or it's going to start reverting back to whatever you think your norm is.
Yeah, but 72 hours is amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I do it every 24 hours, but
There you go.
that's good to know. 72 is where it's at. Yeah.
So we're not.
I was
go
just going to
ahead.
say, if you do it every day, then what you're doing is it never goes back. So it forgets what your baseline was. It moves the baseline, keeps moving the baseline. So like we had somebody the other day, just yesterday, when we were doing some scans here we're at a ranch here in Austin called Music Hill Ranch, which we'd love to have you here. We're going to be doing some big events here. And Rod Harrison, who's put this all together, it's awesome. We're converting this into a health optimization center, and things like that. So it's going to be great. But what she says, oh, it's not going to be good. I haven't slept well in 3 days. Well, Emilio and Rachel, which you probably know them from social media, they both scored 97 and 100, because once your nervous system's up there, it doesn't matter if you think you're not feeling good. Your nervous system still, it's been practiced. You practiced. It's not like they every day they do something, and they're always working on themselves. So you can have a few bad days, but now if they were under that same stress for a month, it probably would change something, because they were running this event. They had a lot to do, and I'm sure that if we got Frank and Kat and them on, they would have been stressed out because they put on the event. That's just the nature of doing all that. You're not sleeping well, but they're able to bounce back.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we're not just operating in one brainwave state at any time. There's always a percentage of each. What are most people operating at, and what is the ideal? And what can we see with BrainTap over time?
Well, what we're training to is the one I just mentioned. We find that it takes I'll just give an example. We took women 55, 65, and we wanted to see, these were all diagnosed with dementia. They took the test with Cambridge Sciences. They had dementia. Their doctors actually diagnosed them with dementia. So we said, you're going to do BrainTap 3 times a day. In the morning, we're going to wake up your brain. We call it digital coffee, because we need to upregulate. We need to upregulate a brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. That has to do with cognition. And that's the brainwave that atrophies the most as we get better looking and more intelligent with age. That's the one that kind of diminishes. And then at night, then we have ones we call digital quaaludes, which is the one that puts you to sleep. So that's the one, it drops you off in delta and has you sleep. And the reason for that is the brain is dysregulated. Most people's brain. So here's when we measure, and this is 90% of the people we see, might even be higher than that, are over 70% delta while they're walking around. You've all heard the expression, the masses are asleep. Well, we validated that. The masses are asleep.
The brain is asleep.
The brain.
Wow.
Yes. The brain wants to go to sleep, I should say, because it's so inflamed. The body's so inflamed, they're so out of regulation, they have stress. And what we find is, like with the brain I'm talking about, and I'll continue the story, is that we found out that the left hemisphere was operating at a different voltage and speed than the right hemisphere. Well, you can't have that. What happens then is you have a mood disorder, stress, anxiety, fear. So the first thing we did, and this is before we knew everything we know now in the science, but we knew we had to balance the brain. So the first 4 minutes of every BrainTap session, and everyone is different because you need to have different experiences. So we're balancing the brain for the first 4 minutes. That's why it's going a little faster and a little more activity, and you might see a little bit more of the lights, because we're challenging the brain to stay balanced. And it's just like learning that dance move. If you don't practice it, because we have to practice in a real world scenario so that when that stress hits you, your brain knows how to re-regulate.
Right.
And so what we were measuring in this study was, first of all, does neuroplasticity really happen in an aging brain with dementia? Number two, how can we measure the reorganization score, which we use the WAVI, which I'm sure you both are aware of, the WAVI technology. So what we could do is we measured the brains before, we measured them after, we had them do the actual testing, we had their doctors evaluate them. 6 weeks later, we go ahead and evaluate them. The cognitive testing, they were now in their preferred range for cognitive function. They were no longer in the dementia. Just for doing BrainTap, nothing else. No nutrition. We know if we would have added nutrition, it would have been better. No exercise. We know if we would have added exercise, it would have been better. But we just wanted to see what would the BrainTap do. We also noticed they had 49% more neuroplasticity, 49% in 6 weeks on an aging brain that had dementia. Their reorganization score is what blew away the people at Duke, because Duke is a partner of ours. We took them to research and they're like, wow, so we're doing a bigger study now. This was only a study of 6 people. So, but every one of them, they had a 58% reorganization skill. We all know people who are aging, they get upset in the morning and they're still upset tomorrow because they don't know how to get their brain back, right? They get upset, frustrated. That's the secret really of a good life is, and I always use Tom Brady because I like University of Michigan, but he could throw 3 interceptions in the first half and come out and throw 4 touchdowns and win the Super Bowl, right? Because he has the ability to reorganize. He doesn't obsess or get so involved in the negative. He says, okay, that happened. That's fine. That happened. But I want to, I see myself winning the game, not losing the game, right? So that reorganization is what's so important. And so we showed, and now we sent them back to their doctors. This was the real eye opener for me, because their doctor said, yeah, you're no longer showing the symptoms of dementia, but we've already diagnosed you. So it's almost like getting that red X, like they used to do in the witch trials in Salem. Nope, you got dementia. The medical community still does not understand the process of healing. They diagnose somebody. This is how you are the rest of your life. Like, we're going to give you this SSRI. You got to take it the rest of your life. That's not true.
Yeah.
None of us on this podcast are the same as we were when it started, at a rate of 50 million cells per second. We're changing. We're evolving based on a lot of different factors, and even our epigenetics are changing every 40 seconds through biophotic exchange. That's what the 99% they call junk DNA is. It's actually the reorganization of our physical reality. So every 40 seconds, we're restructuring all that. And science now confirms that. So it's not just, that's why I say we're light beings, because that's what tells us who we are based on the foods we consume, the people we hang out with, the water we drink. All these things have to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, the human body is just so amazing if we just give it the right information, and whether it's light, sound, whatever information, and we can do magical things with it.
Incredible.
Wow. So if we took everybody in the world and we boiled them down to their physical existence, we could put everybody in a thimble and still have room left over. That's all we are, is information. So we're information exchange. Now we get to feel and touch each other when we're close, but the reality is that that's all an illusion too, because we're already all connected anyway. The underlying reality of everything is consciousness. So we basically evolve out of consciousness, and that's why you think of somebody and they call you on the phone.
Yeah.
It blows me away every time. It really does haon.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah, quantum entanglement, we're all entangled. Nobody gets out of here alive, and we have to help everyone else so that we can go on to whatever the next adventure is. Right now we're choosing our adventure, so we need to have that adventure and move on to the next one.
Yeah. We're all connected.
Very true.
It's beautiful. Well, Dr. Porter, thank you so much for all of this amazing information. Before we let you go, we would just want to ask one final question. If there's one thing that our listeners can start doing today to optimize their health and wellness, other than buying a BrainTap, because we're the biggest fans ever of that, but one thing
they're waiting for it to ship.
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing they can do is choose those three options. They either need to start doing yoga and really seriously do it, which means learn the breathing is the most important, then the positions, or do Tai Chi. I was fortunate enough to study in Wudong and go there where Tai Chi was actually founded. I spent a month there, and it was like I was in a Kung Fu movie for a month. It was really cool. But awesome. You can learn it anywhere. You can learn it on YouTube if you want. Just start moving and breathing, or start dancing. And that means just get up and move and breathe, and you're going to find magic happens in your life. That's going to be the biggest transformation anyone can have. And if you're doing a job, if you're working at home right now, set a timer every 2 hours, get up and do one of those three things, even for 5 minutes. Your life is going to change in ways you can't even imagine.
That's great advice.
I love it.
Yes. Well, Lauren and I actually grew up doing martial arts as well, ninjutsu, and I think that taught us a lot, along with dancing. So it's very powerful.
Yeah.
All right.
I got my son involved in martial arts. He's 6'5", and he was uncoordinated. And I said, I'm going to have you go. And I knew if I didn't do it with him, that he probably wouldn't do it. So we got black belts together and just kept going with it. So
our family too.
Yep. And my daughter, we learned from Curtis Bush, who was one of the ninjas on Turtles, the Ninja Turtles. He was teaching the people for 7 years. I trained with him in Norfolk, Virginia. So it was a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Is so awesome. I love it.
All right. Well, everyone keep moving. Great. Right. Well, so everyone listening, we will share links so you can connect with Dr. Porter online, Facebook, Instagram, the website. There's also a free gift, a 14-day trial to the app. Thank you for sharing that with us. So we'll put all that in the show notes.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're so grateful that you spent the last hour with us, and we can't wait to share this episode with everyone. And thanks to everyone that tuned in today.
All right. Thank you.